I consider myself spiritual, but he considered himself atheist. So what am I doing that's actually spiritual? What are the activities of a soul? The last few decades has seen a steady rise in the number of people who identify themselves as spiritual, but not religious. In fact, many people watching this channel may feel this applies to them. But have you ever asked yourself this question? What does a soul do? How does a soul act compared to the body? What are the activities of a soul? Hey guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Gauranga Prem. If you are new here, we talk about yoga, meditation, and spiritual philosophy. For those who don't know, for 6 years I lived as a monk, and now I like to share what I have learned with others. So, how does a soul act? Today's topic may be a question many of you have wondered. For myself, I asked this question many years ago, and today I would like to share with you what I have learned. But first, some context. I was living in Australia, and I was working a good job. I had good friends, good money. On the weekends, I like to do a little yoga, meditation. At the time, I considered myself a spiritual person. But then there was my dad. He was also working a job. He was earning money. He was married. On the weekends, he did what he liked. But he considered himself an atheist. In fact, he even had his own mantra. When you're dead, that's it, you're dead. And it was with this observation I started to develop this question. My dad and I are basically doing the same thing. I consider myself spiritual, but he considered himself atheist. So what am I doing that's actually spiritual? What are the activities of a soul? It was with this question in mind that I started reading a very old yoga text called Bhagavad Gita. To explain everything that's discussed in the Bhagavad Gita is a topic for another video. Today, what I want to discuss is how this book answered what was for me a very important question. So, let's begin. First, it's necessary to understand the most important principle of the Bhagavad Gita. You're not the body. Our bodies are designed to be temporary. Everything about us fades. Nothing lasts. Our identities are constantly changing. As our bodies grow, our personalities change. What we liked as children and teenagers is not always what we enjoy when we're adults. Our ideas change. Our opinions change. With that, our identity is constantly changing. The Bhagavad Gita compares this to the soul, which is eternal. The very basic belief of spiritualists is that when the body dies, something continues. The Bhagavad Gita agrees. Yes, the soul survives. That is the self. The soul has survived many lifetimes before and will continue to survive into the future. That is what we call reincarnation. This was a great awakening for me. I realized that our physical identities are temporary. So going back to my dad, he identified as Australian, a husband, and an atheist. And based on these opinions of himself, he acted a particular way. But these opinions are temporary. But I realized that to identify as religious is also temporary. I can change my religion just as easily as I change my opinion. I can move from house to house to house as easily as from temple to church to synagogue. What the Gita teaches is that it's first necessary to understand the eternal identity, the soul, to understand that yes, there is a temporary identity which has its own responsibilities to family, friends, and society. And these responsibilities are important, but the greatest importance needs to be on understanding the eternal identity, to understanding the soul. But there is a problem. I don't remember any of my previous lives. I don't know where my next life will be. I only know this temporary life you see now, a white guy from Australia. So, This is where spiritual life begins. To understand that there is an identity which is temporary, relating to the body, and that there is an eternal identity, which is the soul. But we cannot stay here. We must act. So the next question, can I act as a soul now? And the answer is yes, but let me explain. The Bhagavad Gita teaches that it's not enough to simply know something. You must act on that knowledge. For example, let's say you know that smoking is bad, and you see advertising everywhere that smoking is bad, but still you smoke. The Bhagavad Gita teaches that this would be that you don't know that smoking is bad, because you're not acting as though you know smoking is bad. To know something means to act on it. So to act as a soul, we have to know the soul. We have to know ourselves. We have been only living as this body for so long. We don't know ourselves, and it takes time. The Bhagavad Gita is written to teach us how to understand ourselves separate from the body. And so, in the beginning, to act as a soul, it means to act in a way to help us separate our identities, to understand what is temporary and what is eternal. Therefore, any action that helps us to understand this separation can be considered a spiritual action, even if it's not something distinctly spiritual in the beginning. For example, the Bhagavad Gita is a book. Reading a book that helps us to understand the separate nature of our temporary self and our eternal self can be a spiritual act. Whereas reading a book that gives us pleasure, gives us information, but does not help separate our identities is not spiritual. So reading a book is not spiritual. But reading a book that helps us to understand our eternal self is. It's not the book, it's the knowledge, and helping us act on that knowledge that's spiritual. So any act which helps us to understand this separate nature is a spiritual act. And this is the purpose for meditation. This is the purpose for yoga. All of these activities are possible for an atheist. An atheist can meditate. We're not doing these things just to meditate. We're doing these things to help understand our spiritual self. And so we now know who we are. We are souls separate from the body. And we now know what we need to do. We need to do activities that help us to understand this. But we need help. We can't do this alone. And so a third important lesson from the Bhagavad Gita is to find friends that help us to understand that we're not the body. Find the people that can help us to get this separation between temporary and eternal. I know for myself that I left Australia. I moved to New Zealand to be surrounded by people who had this knowledge. I wanted to learn from them this important separation. What is the temporary self and what is the eternal soul? And so the Bhagavad Gita teaches it's not enough just to know. It's not enough just to do, but to do and know in good company. So, as an important lesson from Bhagavad Gita, find those people that can help you understand that there is a difference between this temporary identity and the eternal soul. And read Bhagavad Gita for this most important knowledge and learn how to act as a soul.